Okay, we are recording. All right, so it is 5:42 p.m. and I'm going to convene the meeting of the Lewis and Clark Olney Woluski Planning Area Citizen Advisory Committee meeting. We'll start with introductions. I'm Gail Hendrickson, Community Development Director.
Paula View, Lewis and Clark.
Will Kaplinger, Greenwood Resources.
Jim Nikas, Lewis and Clark.
Jim Coughlin, Lewis and Clark.
Next item of business is review of the October 30th, 2019 meeting summary. Were there any corrections, additions, deletions? Okay, let it be noted that the meeting minutes are accepted as presented. Next is the report from the countywide liaison. That's Jim.
That is me. And I've told you all this before. I don't take notes. I can't take notes. And it was a very informative meeting. We had quite a number of individuals representing the public, some from the industry as well. This gentleman was present. Each of the other groups seemed to have issues that they'd already put into statements and were interested in making part of the background information. And other than that, I can't tell you a whole lot. I wish I could. Very abridged.
Okay, our next item of business is an overview of Goal 4. So Goal 4 is dedicated to forest lands. Forest lands is predicated by the Forest Practices Act. So when it comes to our discussion of forest lands in the constraint of Goal 4, there's not a lot that we can put in to mandate more extreme measures in terms of forestry practices. What we can do with Goal 4 is we can talk about ways to encourage and incentivize best practices or behaviors that we'd like to see. But again, it's probably not going to impact big forest harvesting or timber industry folk. It's really where we might have an impact would be on smaller scale levels, requiring tree replantings in areas like Arch Cape and Falcon Cove Beach. Encouraging the planting of multiple species when a lot is cleared, things like that. What we can also think about is how forest lands tie into the other goals that we have in the comprehensive plan. So when we think about forest lands, we think about the forest, but we may not think about how it's impacting Goal 9, which is economic development, or Goal 8, which is recreational lands, or Goal 16, which is estuarine resources, or even Goal 10, which deals with housing. There's goals that deal with energy conservation, and Goal 5, which deals with open space and natural resources, and wildlife habitat, and fish habitat. So forest lands, even though we're focused on Goal 4 right now, and it's very big and intertwined throughout the entire comprehensive plan. So this will not be our only discussion touching on forests and forest lands. So I'm going to stop it at that. We did have a forest lands conservation meeting last night, conversation meeting last night, which brought together people representing conservation interests, timber industry interests. We had people from Department of Forestry there. Will was there, so I'm going to call upon Will to kind of give us his take on the meeting last night, if you would, Will.
It was amazing how much interest there was in the Forest Practices Act. In spite of Gail's very eloquent description of how the meeting was not going to focus on it. And so many people didn't take that to heart. And there's a lot of misinformation, which That's just the task to all of the partners. For instance, one fellow mentioned that there's completely unregulated spraying going on,
Yeah.
where, by contrast, spraying is highly regulated. But if the perception is that it's not regulated, then that's the fault of educators and applicators and so on. So, this process, of course, will address a lot of that. All in all, there were some very constructive things. I thought that the two gentlemen that were invited, Bob Van Dyke and, the other fellow.
Ralph Bloomhood.
Yeah, they had some very constructive comments, and a number of the members of the audience, we're trying to pull everything together. I think Bruce had was very well spoken. Bruce Francis. It was just unfortunate that so much of the energy went into the Forest Practices Act. Even after the break, when you said we're going to now talk about opportunities, and we're still hashing around the Forest Practices Act. So that's not going to go away. But it was about half of the group was willing to follow the agenda and the spirit that the meeting was intended to be. And one of the good things that came out were Mark Morgan's comments about the value of the tours and how that enabled people to be able to dispel any myths that were promulgated during the meeting, and also have a better understanding from not only an industry perspective, but the complexity of the industry as well, because it's not just a timber industry. It's we deal with recreation, we deal with water quality. Greenwood has employees that attend all of the watershed council meetings. We work with fish passage projects, all the regulatory agencies, easements. I personally sold a lot of land out of there to the North Coast Land Conservancy and provided conservation easements. So there's a much wider perspective on forest lands that came out in some areas and just needs to be more. The first meeting we had that I attended last Thursday, I think it was Cheryl Johnson kept calling it the forestry goal, and that's just a term, of course, but it needs to be appreciated in a wider spectrum, that it's forest lands, and there's all these uses that are out there. And I think you do a very good job. Gail does a very good job of bringing that out, and staff does, and the committee members do as well. A lot of people in the public don't seem to have gotten that yet, and that's where a lot of the aspirational and initiatives and the opportunities are going to come from. And that's what we like to see in the timber industry as well, because it can evolve and it can change, and it just needs a wider understanding of the willingness and the ability of the timber industry to do that.
So, having talked a little bit about Goal 4 and how forest lands tie into the other goals, and hearing what Will said, we're going to enter our discussion now. And I guess there's two ways we can go about this. We have this group of sort of discussion-generating questions, which we can go through. Or if you'd prefer, do you want to go through the worksheet that actually has the policies from Goal 4 and just go through those and see what we want to keep or change or rewrite or say everything's good?
Yeah, very narrow what you can do, because most of it's under forest practices and the rest of it's regulated by the state. So what level of anything can you do on the county level besides
put in nice aspirational language, like Will said, that encourage X or Y or Z.
Yeah, and that's probably right. That's about all we can do on it.
Well, there's some programmatic things. I mentioned one last night, the transfer of development rights, which is just a small one tool that could be used to conserve resource lands of all kinds, and forestry as well as agriculture. We don't have any kind of a robust program for that in the county, and many counties do not. It can be quite a challenge. And the county used to run more of a program and just keeping the records straight, because a lot of people want to bank them, and it's crazy. So, you know, that's a whole nother initiative, and I'm sorry I reared its ugly head, but,
Can,
you know,
can't bank buildability rights now on forest land, can you?
well, the county has the ability to keep a list of credits that haven't been applied to a receiving area, so they can
really?
be sold out of unless regulations have changed. I checked
Really?
with the DLCD the other day, and,
Huh.
you know, but you have to have a program. It has to be administered, and you have to identify an area, at least 10,000 acres for a sending site, which would be, you know, there's a variety of that. We have 140,000 acres alone in just our one company. The Weyerhaeuser holdings are about 50,000 acres. Stimson has several hundred acres at least in the county. So there's a lot of opportunity for identifying areas that would be conserved. In one way, these are areas that we'd never want to see residentially developed anyway. But it would be an incentive to be able to increase density in some areas where receiving sites have not been identified. Right now, they're just in Clatsop Plains, and that's not necessarily an area where the county, I think, would want to see increased density. It doesn't have the water, the sewer, the soils, and so on. Some of the rural communities might be better suited for that, but they haven't been identified as receiving sites. And again, it's a whole program that would need to be designed and so on. But it's just one idea.
Yeah. And we sort of discussed this on the Jeffers Gardens one about moving densities up into the forest areas, but that's the opposite of what you're talking about. But
Yeah.
you're talking about tax lot of records and the 160 acre rule and all that good kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Huh. Cool. Yeah. Let's
Yeah.
do it.
Well, the other hand, which would be an equal challenge, would be to convince the state and legislature that forest lands may need to be converted on the fringe. You take Seaside, for instance, you know, moving the school up there, critical facilities up out of the tsunami zone and so on. And the forest lands are all in the high elevation, so you know, there's a big interest in being able to move things up there. The county's interested in acquiring the Lewis and Clark Main Line for an emergency and alternate Highway 101 route. And then, of course, if that became a public road, then there are all these opportunities probably for residential development and critical facilities back there. County yards, fire stations, maybe hospital annexes, you know, they're too far out of Seaside there, so kind of a two-way street.
Cool.
Okay, so back to my question. Do you want to go through these questions on the agenda? Well, I know what you think.
I don't.
I'm looking to Paula.
I already know.
Well, I'm sure. If there's something else, did you want to just go through the policies? Is that what you're saying, Jim?
Oh, no, it's fine. Anything you want to do. If you don't understand it, see, I have pretty good knowledge of all of this, but if you don't feel comfortable with it, do it
Yeah.
line by line.
Well, I can always catch up too.
So I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're doing.
I was gonna, if you just want to skip and go to the policy
Right.
part that we look through is what you're saying, I'm fine with that. I can always.
All right, so at the back of your Goal 4 tab, if you can bring yours,
I did not.
you should have that pull-out worksheet that's the big ledger size thing, and that's got the policy.
Cool 4. For some reason I have part of goal 4 out of goal 4. Yeah, we were having that same discussion about the Jefferson Gardens and all the crap down there, moving it, you know, up there past the school and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's basically what you were talking about.
That's goal 5. We need to make some room. Yes, it did.
Mine was a Build-A-Bear.
It was, but you got it at a discounted price. All right, so there are all the goals.
All right.
So have that one, and I'll just show it to you. So I'll let you read since you have the paper in front of you. Let's start with the first.
Okay.
So let's start with the overarching goal.
It says forest lands shall be conserved for forest uses, including the production of trees and the processing of forest products, open space, buffers from noise, visual separation from conflicting uses, watershed protection, wildlife and fisheries habitat, soils protection from wind and water, maintenance of clean air and water, outdoor recreational activities compatible with these uses, and grazing land for livestock. That's one of the worst run-on sentences I've ever tried to read.
So what do we think about that? Is that goal still accurate? Does it cover everything that we want to cover?
Yes,
I can't think of anything that's left out.
yes. Covers too much as far as I'm concerned, so I say yes.
So,
Policy 2,
yep.
forest lands shall be designated conservation forest in the county's comprehensive plan. When considering a zone change to a forest zone, the Planning Commission or other reviewing body shall review the proposal against the acreage, management, and other approval criteria in the county-wide forest lands policies, number 19, 20, and 21.
So we do have our forest lands designated as such in the comp plan. So that part's been accomplished and we're not going to change that. Our review still goes to the Planning Commission, and I think, Paula, you had a question or a comment?
No, I was just saying yes to what you said.
Okay. And then if somebody did come in for a zone change, then we would review it against those policies 19, 20, and 21. So I don't know that we need a change there. Does anybody see a need for a change on that one? Okay. All right, let's go to
Policy number 3, forest practices on lands designated conservation forest shall conform to the Oregon Forest Practices Act and Oregon Forest Practice Rules as revised.
Gee,
We should change that one.
we really should.
Yeah.
We don't need no stinking rules.
That's right. Let's just create an anarchism. Forest practices anarchy.
Yeah, I don't think the state will allow us, so.
All right, so we can't touch that.
Don't look like it.
All right.
Division of forest lands will be permitted only upon a finding that the proposed division meets the following criteria. The proposed division will not diminish the potential for timber production or watershed production and fish and wildlife habitat, and it goes on to be, the creation of new parcels will not materially alter the overall stability of the area's land use pattern.
Shall not interfere with the greatest permanent value.
The greatest permanent value?
Yeah, I'm gonna shrink it up.
We could. So,
However, the state is defining it that today.
I'm sure that came from the state, actually.
okay. So does anybody have any suggestions regarding that policy 4? Paula?
Policy 5, the clustering of non-forest residences on the forest lands may be permitted in the AF20 and F38 zones, subject to non-forest use citing standards, I'm sorry.
Okay, we don't have any of those.
We don't. It's all
So-
AF or F80 now, so we need to update the zoning regs, or references.
This non-forest development is permitted conditionally because properly designed and sited, it does not result in the loss of forest lands, nor does it diminish or interfere with forest uses.
So we need to get rid of all that because it's not permitted anyway. We can't cluster anymore anyway in forest.
Clustering non-forest residences on forest lands.
Well, we do actually, when we do a template test, when you build your house, if you're approved for a template test, you are supposed to build it as close to other existing development as possible.
Yeah, but we're still not allowed to cluster if we have like 160 acres, multiple things. We can't cluster them onto one tax lot, can we? I thought they did away with all of that.
And that's what Will's talking about,
Yeah,
is that
to
transfer of development.
do
right?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the state, we used to be able to do that with these. And in fact, I've done them in my lifetime, and what was it, in 98? Or they did away with them when they did the 1 to 2 acre minimum lot size. They eliminated the clustering, I believe. Maybe.
So, I don't know the answer to that, but
Yeah,
I think that's
I think so.
something we probably need to look at. So if we cannot do that any longer, then would you recommend we take that out of
Yes.
Go for it?
That whole policy 5, because obviously the first part of it's null and void at this point. Unless, isn't the state, don't we have some new thing where we can do AF20s, or didn't the legislature just pass something on that? I'm just talking.
Wasn't that the thing that you asked me about a few months
Well,
ago?
now
And I think I said
that's
that
farm,
before.
non-farm dwelling. That's different. This is forest. But I believe, and I don't know, I'm just talking. Anyway, the first part of that is, I believe, null and void. So, and I believe the second part is too. So,
Okay.
if it doesn't apply, obviously it shouldn't be there.
We take that.
So at this point, back to that, so you can build a house anywhere in the world in Clatsop County on 240 acres. It doesn't have to pass a template test. So what you're talking about is taking all your 240 acres and doing clusters. Is that what you were? Yeah.
Yeah, 160 acres.
Is it 160 or 240?
160 is a large
Yeah.
tract.
I said that the first time. Anyway. Okay.
We'll let our stenographer catch up.
Before
go
I
ahead,
start,
I'm ready.
before I get completely off subject, talking about other things like I always do. Anyway, okay.
Policy 6.
No, can I have a question?
Yeah, sure.
I know the way the agenda's set up, there's no public until the end. Do you want me to still comment when they're?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A little more,
We'll
okay.
never get out
Step
of
in.
it.
All right, I
anytime
just
you
want to make sure. But what you said in 5, because template test is allowed, you might want to have some kind of policy about clustering them, so that it supports that use in the zoning code. Because you could say something about, non-forest residences that are allowed, or non-forest residences shall be clustered according to, some kind of policy in there. And you might even take it from the state language. They talk about siting standards shall be designed to make allowed uses compatible with forest operations, agriculture, and to conserve values found on forest lands. So you could just say they shall be sited, to make it so that they're compatible with forest operations and forest uses. And clustering is just one way to do that. Like you said in the template test, the house needs to be located near other residences if there are any nearby. So.
All right, I got all that. Okay.
Policy 6, the designation of new park and recreation areas, campgrounds, etc. on forest lands shall require an assessment of public need for these facilities and their potential impact on adjacent forest lands. That goes on. The practice rules as advised,
I
as
think
revised.
It flips on the back.
Oh, it goes on the back, okay, that didn't fit. Okay, productive. The productive capacity of the land shall be evaluated and considered when siting these developments. These developments, if allowed, shall be sited and designed so as not to preclude forest management whenever possible.
So, if I understand, it's if it was more productive to do something else, you wouldn't want to designate it a park or recreation area?
Yeah, I'd have to read it. I can hear, but I read better.
Yeah.
So what you're going to be looking at is, first of all, you want to look and see, do we even have a need for more recreation land or campgrounds? If we do, then you want to look at the land that you're looking at, how productive is it in terms of forest management or forest use? And then if it's not, that productive of a piece of land, you have a need for it, then you design and site it so that you don't preclude other forest management activities around it. So it's kind of a three-step process.
It makes sense to, in the future, imagine that we might have more need for additional parks in the county. So I think this is a reasonable statement to make regarding how you choose that.
Yeah, I agree.
Mr. Neckers, you have any thoughts on policy 6?
It's already pretty easy to do.
What was that?
It's already pretty easy to do. To do primitive campgrounds and stuff like that.
I can't hear you down here. I have this giant beat source in my
I'm
head.
eating. Go ahead.
Well, do whatever. Okay.
I'm just talking.
I'll move on to policy 7 then.
Yep.
The county will do the following in order to minimize conflicts between the use of forest land and elk habitat and for commercial timber production. A, wildlife refuges. Existing wildlife refuges which are owned, leased, and managed by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife or by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service shall be designated conservation other resource and zoned open space, parks and recreation, OPR. The zoning designation would be that parks.
So I would have to double check that we've actually done that, but I suspect that we have.
Proposed wildlife management areas which are managed and either owned or leased by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, located in areas designated conservation forest or in other lowland areas under any plan designation, shall be reviewed by the county for compliance with the approval standards listed below. Such hearings shall be conducted according to a Type 4 procedure at a time and place convenient to residents of the affected planning area. ODF&W shall provide an evaluation of the economic, social, environmental, and energy consequences of the proposal and information sufficient to support findings with respect to the following approval criteria. Criteria is identification of the need for a proposed new wildlife management area. Need means specific problems or conflicts that will be resolved, or specific ODFW objectives that will be achieved by establishing the proposed area. Do we want to discuss that one individually, or?
We can.
Well,
I will say, I've been here 2 years. ODFW has never proposed a new wildlife. Do you have any institutional memory, Will? Did you ever have ODFW come forward with a new refuge?
Fish, are you talking new areas?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only thing that I know that's been new lately is the new boat ramp they're going to put out at Smiley's Hole, which is Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah. But that's not going to be
Yeah.
a wildlife refuge area.
No, isn't a county park involved in county parks?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, it's
not with the one Jim's talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's different. What I would see as a need, though, is we are in the midst of the Solutions Oregon project to talk about the Clatsop Plains elk, and there may be something that comes out of that this might apply to. But I don't think there's been a new refuge in I don't know how many years.
Nature Conservancy got part of that, part of whatchamacallit, but they didn't rename it as anything.
I still can't hear you.
Nature Conservancy got part of the where Hankey's doing his development, the 150 acres to the south,
Yep.
and whether they'd want to rename something like that. I mean,
You mean up on Tillamook Head?
no.
No.
Right by Reed-Nerding there,
Oh, okay.
the old PP&L.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's butterfly habitat, right?
Well, is it?
Yeah.
It's elk.
I think.
Well, the
Well,
elk
are there
don't know
too.
that.
Well, they don't eat the violets, yeah.
Is that
Okay.
that's designated as butterfly habitat, and
Some of it is, yeah. It's what they intend to manage it for.
okay.
Okay, so criteria number 2, alternative lands and management actions available to the ODFW, and an analysis of why those alternatives or management actions will not resolve identified problems or achieve objectives. Okay, so
So these criteria are intended to force ODFW to justify why they want to create a new refuge. And I guess my question is, why were we or why are we so hard on ODFW?
What do you mean hard on it?
Well, we're making them,
jump through a lot of hoops.
we're giving them a lot of requirements here to.
Well, sure, because
Do
they want to
something.
take all our land away from us
There is that. And the tax base, yeah.
and the tax base.
I was just curious.
Okay, back to
I imagine that's probably something from the state also that mirrors some state statute, I guarantee it.
Go on to B, the State Fish and Wildlife Commission shall be officially requested to resolve the existing adverse impacts on forest land resulting from elk browse. The following measures are suggested. Revision of hunting laws, reduce the elk population in Clatsop County to sustained management levels, compensate landowners for damage to forest crops resulting from elk, and where appropriate, provide technical and financial assistance to forest landowners for the installation of fencing. Excuse me.
Good luck.
They definitely can create a lot of issues.
Yes, I can.
And a fence isn't gonna help. Yeah, trust me.
And what do we deem sustained management levels for this policy?
Fish and Wildlife actually, you talked to Herman Biederbeck's the guy I know the best down there in Tillamook, and I think they still manage the herds at around 7,000 plus or minus animals, and they do surveys every year, aerial surveys, they know pretty much how many animals are out there, and then they adjust the hunt levels so that they can kind of maintain that. And they have both bull hunts and cow hunts, and then we have hunts on our property as well, and we open up gates and allow vehicles in there to help them out, and the state police come in and patrol that. So it's a pretty well-developed program, and it tends to keep the animals at about the same level. Although, yeah, somebody in Gearhart, they probably wouldn't agree with that.
You
They're
know
all,
Herman
they're all in
retired.
Gearhart.
Is he really?
Yeah,
Oh.
end of the year.
Oh, didn't know that.
What would it do if the elk numbers were reduced? Would it be advantageous for the, because a lot of the elk hunters around here that I know complain that they never get an opportunity to shoot one close to home. They always get their tags someplace else in
Well,
the
there's
state.
plenty of them around here.
Are there?
Yeah.
Are there a lot of them?
Yeah.
That shouldn't be a problem.
Plenty.
Oh, there's plenty of elk. Yeah.
I would think if you reduce the levels, you're saving money, property damage.
But you run into a whole different kettle of worms at a sustainable, where do you hit the sustainability versus, and then you run into all that opposition. Hunting's about as unpopular as timber harvest to a lot of citizens in Clatsop County.
Over-harvesting elk.
Over-harvesting timber and elk.
Yeah. It's really popular among hunters, though.
I know, true.
The archery season, they just come out of the woodwork, and then when we open up the lands, and a lot of other Weyerhaeuser sells leases, hunting leases, and they're of course very popular. So I think if you reduce, most of those are in Washington, but they have quite a few in Clatsop County as well.
And it economically means a ton to the area too, because hunting, fishing, all that brings in tons of dollars.
Yeah.
To the state as well.
To everybody.
Okay, item C, the county shall take the necessary action through the state legislative assembly to revise the laws governing the actions of the State Fish and Wildlife Commission for the provision of acceptable methods of relief to property owners from damage due to elk.
Do we do that now?
I do not know what the status of that is.
I don't know that anybody's ever gotten that.
Yeah.
I think I need to start applying.
Yeah, really. You might want to check with the ODFW, because
Boy, I've repaired a lot of fences
if
they've
any of
torn
these
down.
are even viable, if they have programs for this. I wouldn't know.
I've never heard of it.
What did it cost to put the fence around the municipal airport?
Well, lots, but the
Oh, yeah.
FFA paid for that.
Yeah.
God, that's an enormous one, yeah.
But that's what it took to keep them out.
And it still didn't work.
No, not always, does it?
Learjet found that out.
Okay, policy 10, jump from 7 to 10, okay.
Yeah, there's a numbering issue there, so.
Forestry activities within the watersheds in areas designated conservation forest in the comprehensive plan will be conducted in accordance with the Oregon Forest Practices Act and the Oregon Forest Practices Rules as revised. Additional protective measures neglected between forest landowners and water users are encouraged. Additional protective measures
Are encouraged.
are encouraged, yes. So do more than you're required if
Yes, it's a warm, fuzzy policy, but it's very difficult to achieve.
And again, the state's gonna make you do what you gotta do anyway. You don't have a choice.
in some cases.
Really?
Yeah. We'll talk about that.
Do we want to continue to encourage people to go above and beyond?
Oh, yeah, I think so. Policy 11, the productive capacity of the land will be considered before land designated conservation forest is changed to another plan designation. The impact of the proposed new use on the adjacent lands shall also be evaluated and considered before such a plan change is made.
Again, that's
That
an
doesn't
ORS.
require much
Yeah.
change. Pretty much.
Okay.
12, off-road vehicles, ORVs, shall be strictly confined to established rock roads in order to prevent erosion, stream degradation, damage to young trees and seedlings, and disturbance of wildlife and its habitat.
Good luck enforcing that one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
Not seen
know
that
that
as-
we,
Can't
Why
even,
the county locks its gates.
That's
Why
one of
they
the
lock
reasons
their
the
gates.
gates are up there too.
yeah.
And we're constantly going out because they do these little trails that go around the gates on both sides. Almost every gate you can see, and you put in rocks, they'll move the rocks. You put in trees, they'll cut them out. It's just amazing. Yeah, and they do tear a lot of things up out there.
they leave a lot of garbage too. That just drives me up the wall.
Yeah.
Okay. So we did 12? Policy 13. Existing utility right-of-ways shall be utilized to the maximum extent possible before new right-of-ways are created. That's a no-brainer.
That should be rights of way.
Rights-of-way,
That's
yes.
a minor point, but
Yes.
it's like Fats Domino.
you ought to be a planner.
A planter.
Roads in forest areas shall be limited to the minimum width necessary for traffic management and safety. Pretty much a no-brainer.
What's the minimum width of a forest road, Will?
There isn't, well, a normal one, if it's a main line's about 60 feet.
Isn't it?
But
The right of way.
well,
Yeah, they're 40 to 60 feet. Depends on where they are. But just the forest roads themselves, again, that's forest practices. And that's changed a lot too. They used to run them down along the streams, and now the idea is to get up out of the stream beds and away, and so build them higher up. But, a road surface itself, it has to be at least 12 feet.
right. And that's what when we used to build them, that's what our spec was, 12 feet. For secondary,
Yeah,
roads.
and then you still have ditches, there culverts and so on, for water management. That's not included in the road width. So that'd be in the right of way, but most of the forest roads don't have actual rights of way in them, unless they're crossing private land or in between landowners, something like that. The ones they build out in the forest, they'll shift them around. Sometimes they'll let them grow over, and they won't even use some roads until the end of the harvest season, or when the cycle comes around again.
So I have to ask a question just for my own educational benefit. When we talk about main lines, are they all old railroad rights of way? No.
Some of them are,
Yeah.
like the Lewis and Clark Main Line. Youngs River, I think, might have had a railroad. There was a mill in there. Especially the ones that are dead straight. You know, you're going to find old railroad rights of way there.
So, but it mainly just represents the main road into and out of the area where they're working.
Yeah.
They have what they call spurs usually. Well, they use the term spurs that are usually side secondary roads that are usually the 12 feet that usually will go into dead ends or big areas which are landings and stuff like that. But they're usually, most of the spurs are just dead end roads. There are some of them that connect, but
Yeah, and then the main lines will connect out to the road, county roads and highways.
I was just curious because it's railroad terminology. That's why I wanted to clarify in my head. Okay.
Yeah, there's a history there. Yeah.
Lewis and Clark is definitely.
It has something to do with the gradient that's already there. It's kind of nice. They hold those to pretty low
And
gradient.
Young's Rivers also too.
Policy 15, forest landowners shall be encouraged to actively pursue methods of complete utilization of wood fiber left on the ground after harvesting. Starting to see a little more of that, aren't we?
I think so. Is this what we're referring to as biomass when we talk about that?
Rather than burning, they take it and
Yeah, it's gone all kinds of directions. You know, the chip market for one informs that a lot. And there's been interest in biomass. We had an Indian, East Indian company come, excuse me, a few years ago, wanting to build a biomass plant on Lewis and Clark Main Line up above Seaside. But that didn't pan out. This kind of went away. But they come up every once in a while, and if there's, that was creating biofuel. But that's something that, I have no idea where the market is for that sort of thing now.
I believe this is what John Dunzer is pushing for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, he has ever since the oil.
Problem is,
What was the first LNG project down there? Bradwood Landing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the problem is it's not cost efficient like everything else, and unless you subsidize it, it doesn't work. It's kind of like ethanol and all that. It's it's great, warm and fuzzy feeling, but it's not economically feasible at this point in time.
Yeah, and you've seen the big chip trucks, run down through Astoria, and they come out of the timberlands and take a lot of those chips. They come from the Nygaard's mill out there. They grind up a lot of pulp logs, send the chips out to Awana, but I think Awana is now grinding their own.
Yeah.
I don't know, so the need of that is down.
So, do you guys still have the where you doing the grinding and stuff on your forest lands themselves, or do you?
Yeah, I haven't seen a grinder in years, but I don't get out in the forest lands much.
Yeah,
I'm
because it was
trapped in the office.
they used to take all the stuff and make hog fuel, what they call hog fuel out of it. They just grind up what's left on the landing. They'd actually have a grinder there with a short chip trailer and do it right out in the woods and then haul it to Wana, and they use it for electricity generation. So, but like you say, Wana used to do it. They used to do it, and then they quit for a decade, and now they're doing it again.
It's got to be too expensive.
Yeah. And it's just an amazing amount of slash that comes out of a timber operation. Some of it's left on the ground, but then you have these light fuels, and of course it helps to prevent erosion. But those are the things that burn very easily and dry out quickly. So we don't want to leave a lot of that out. Generally, they'll leave stumps in the ground as well to help hold the soil, and they're just a big hassle to pull out. And then what do you do with the stump?
And the actual biomass out in the forest land is in the last 30 years has diminished out in the actual forest because everything now is tree length. They'll just cut the tree right down there, pull it in tree length, where in the good old days, when the trees were bigger, they used to buck them up and leave the tops and everything out in the landing. Now everything's coming to the landing, and then they have processors that'll process them and cut them, so you end up with the tops and stuff like that that you never did have before, and that's what brought up these other programs. So there's less, it's what we call cleaner logging, which most people don't call cleaner.
It's
And,
using the whole tree.
right.
Yeah.
But what does the fungus that lives symbiotically with the trees here in the Northwest, when you rip the stumps out of the ground, does that create any issues with regard to that? Is it better to leave stumps?
Well, they
and
do
just
leave,
allow them
they
to
do
rot?
leave
They
all
do
the
leave
stumps.
windows, yeah.
That was
Stumps are
thinking,
generally left in, yeah.
Stumps are all still to this day left. The only, like I say, the only thing that's more brought to the landing than was never before was the crown of the tree that they still don't use.
And Jim would know more about the history and process of this than I do, but, you know, they used to take larger trees. There were, of course, larger trees that were available, and the mills could process them. Now the mills are, one of the reasons they have the 40-year cycle is to grow trees of a more uniform size, and then the mills have been retooled to take these smaller logs.
Right.
We leave a lot of wood in that's older because there's no market for it. You know, there are very few mills that can take the bigger trees, 40-inch diameter and so on. And so in many cases we have 70, 80-year-old stands that we aren't going to take. And those are the ones that we like to see turn into conservation easements or conservation areas. But again, there's not a real big market for that either, because you have to get somebody to buy the easement or the area and then manage it. And so these longer rotations, if they say, well, if you got to go to a longer rotation, then you have the economic impact of then ending up with bigger trees and the mills having to retool to be able to process those when it comes time to harvest them.
And oddly enough, the only ones, there's very few big mills left, and there's actually one in Clatskanie, but the only other ones are in the valley. And they've all, most of them have retooled to the smaller. Oddly enough, the export markets are the ones that drive the price of the bigger wood, which is, you would think it would be the opposite. So it's actually better for this country and better for the economy to have a smaller log like they're processing now that everybody doesn't like, because it keeps all the jobs and all the manufacturing in this country. And like I say, all the bigger logs, unless they're off a state forest, which they try to leave. And when you go to a state timber sale, they will leave the big trees for leave trees. So.
So we're at 17, I believe. Expansion of existing non-forest developments and uses in forest zones may be permitted under a Type 2 procedure only when such expansion is substantially confined to the existing site.
I'm sorry, did you do 16? Did we cover 16?
Maybe we didn't. Maybe we skipped 16.
I thought we left off with harvest, the fiber.
Yeah, we did.
You're right.
No, I'm sorry.
Quit paying attention, Will.
Thought maybe I dozed off. I don't know.
Okay, so where forest lands of suitable management size occur in the interior or rural residential areas or are completely surrounded by residential development, small woodland management and farming is encouraged. Other time these areas, other times these areas may be needed for housing, and in future comprehensive plan updates shall be considered ideally situated for conversion to residential uses prior to conversion of other forest lands.
Yeah, let's do that.
Well, it has been done to some extent already.
I don't know any forest land that's been converted to residential land, not in my lifetime.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Well, private forest lands, maybe not state or...
And not if it's zone forestry, it isn't.
Yeah.
It's never been done.
The
Yeah.
background, and I don't know, you're not going to do much on the background reports, the old ones.
Say again,
those
what?
the background reports
Uh-huh.
for these elements, like the goal 4 background report, it's pretty thick, but I know there's a part in there that says forest parcels as small as, I think it's 4 acres are considered viable for timber management. So if you have a finding like that in a background report, it's very difficult to justify rezoning forest land if it's a small parcel.
See, a lot of stuff that you think is forest land that's being developed into residential is in fact zoned already as residential. It's just got trees growing on it. I have a particular parcel that's got 25 acres of 100-year-old trees on it that probably within the next 5 years is probably going to end up being houses, but it wasn't forestry. It's surrounded by forestry, but that particular parcel
Was it different in the 90s?
No, not since '80. Not since
Really?
1980.
Okay.
You had smaller tracks. You had the F38s, the AF20s, and the AF38s. So therefore, in a forest land, you could have 20-acre parcels at that point. That may be what you're thinking of is 20-acre parcels. And see, now it's 80 acres.
So is this policy still relevant today?
It's relevant if the state let you do it, but they're never going to let you do it, as you very well know. You have to show need of necessity, so
Yeah.
not really.
So do we want to recommend taking it out?
The thing about the future comprehensive plan updates, you're going to do this again in 40 years.
Yeah, see,
It'll be after my tenure.
and see, you should probably leave it in there because who knows what the legislature's going to do 5-10 years from now when, need for housing's even greater than it is today. Then you're going to end up going back and saying, why didn't we have this policy? So,
Yeah, and right now there's, I did a really interesting exercise because I consult on the side, and I had a client who wanted to rezone some AF land down in Hamlet. And one of the requirements is that you have to demonstrate that the residential use can't be met in any other area, and they don't specify the size of the geographic area, but I looked around Hamlet and up and down the 26 corridor and all the way down towards Camp 18 and beyond, and there's all kinds of vacant parcels in there. And I just said, there's no way that any reasonable person is going to say that you need to do this on this property here. There's plenty of opportunity for development. These little RA5 parcels, and some of them are larger than 5 acres, 10, 20 acres, and so on. And there just is a lot of unutilized residentially zoned land. That may change, though, as people say, well, there's no place to build. There's a lot of places to build. The owners may not be willing to sell or develop, but the zoning is there.
inventories.
So
Yeah.
basically, we're going to just leave
Yeah,
that
the
for
inventory.
posterity?
Yep.
Posterity. 18, partitioning of forest lands under the provisions of Clatsop County's,
17?
No, 17, yeah.
no, 17. Boy, I'm trying to jump ahead a bit. Expansion of existing non-forest developments and uses of forest zones may be permitted under a Type 2 procedure only when such expansion is substantially confined to the existing site.
Can you do that?
Well, I want to read it because again,
That-
my hearing and my vision.
Yeah,
vision
what I'm
learning
hearing,
are
what I'm
better.
hearing doesn't make any sense in this day and age either.
Well, I mean, unless you own two side-by-side sites, I don't know.
Yeah, but
why
that's
we
still
even need that
a
policy.
template then.
Yeah.
Of course, they've changed that a little bit too.
Well,
Well,
this doesn't even specifically call out
Tract.
dwellings, it's any development. And if I have a campground in a forest zone and I want to expand it, I can't expand off my site.
Yes.
Well, again, what do they mean by non-forest developments? Because if forest uses include recreation,
Yeah.
And non-forest developments are what are not allowed.
yeah, do they mean,
It's a type 2.
Maybe non-forest
non-conforming.
harvesting.
It goes out for a 10-day public comment, there's a staff report, an appeal period, but it doesn't go to a public.
Non-forest harvesting? I don't know.
yeah, is the
Only
meaning
when
here perhaps
such expansion
non-conforming
is
uses?
substantially confined to the
Could
existing
be,
site.
I don't know.
I think the language, I think the language could be tweaked a little bit on that one, but, because the way
So,
I read it, it's irrelevant the way it is.
Perhaps, so it relates more to what you have in the zoning code, you might want to have language about non-conforming uses in there. It's up.
but still, I still have to stay on my site.
Yeah,
Yeah, substantially confined to the
Substantially,
existing site.
so,
That doesn't really make a lot of sense.
yeah. They might mean the footprint again instead of the site, is the building site,
Okay.
not just the parcel. No, I don't know.
Yeah.
would we
Well,
wanna-
that's a problem with the statement. It
Yeah,
doesn't define anything clearly.
no.
so if this isn't a state reg, would we want to put a percentage on it? Say, if you've got a non-conforming or non-forest dwelling, non-forest development, you can expand it up to 20% of the existing area, or 30%, or something like that. Do we want to define it better?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the percentages would probably have to be higher than that, because you've got some small, forestry lots that are lots of record. So if you go 20%, that poor guy's got an acre, he ain't gonna be able to do much there if he chooses to.
Well, 20% doesn't sound like a substantially confined either. Expansion should be substantially confined.
Oh, that one, it needs some thought.
So if we were to put a percentage on it, what would we consider to be a good percentage? Maybe a range?
Well,
or-
like the housing, in the city of Astoria and everything else, they use 60% as a rule for the coverage of a lot. So something like that.
Do we want to tie the percentage to the actual size of the lot? So if you're a small lot of record, maybe up to 20 acres, you get X percentage, but if your land is, 100 acres, should you still have 60%? Because that's a lot of development then.
I don't
just
think you
get
can
the
do this.
intention of it.
I don't. The only thing that this really reflects on are what probably should be allowed besides forest production in a forest zone are campsites and, primitive campsites and regular campsites and stuff like that. I guess you could start talking about, in this day and age, which does sort of make sense, is marijuana buildings and marijuana building developments and marijuana processing and hemp oil processing.
We're all
and
about hemp now.
blah, 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 and
We're
all
done
that
with
garbage.
Cannabis.
Then that's got some relevancy to it because it's allowed in the thing, but those are the only type of real impact uses that I can see in the,
The use will still
forest
have
zone.
to not interfere with forestry uses, and that's covered by a different.
And that is. To change the fabric of.
What's the intent of the policy?
That's a good question.
That's what
I
we've
mean, I
been
guess,
discussing.
what are we trying to?
Keep reading it and they keeps rolling around in my head. The expansion of existing non-forest development.
I'm not sure if the
And see, and that's, like I say, again, it's, how old's this policy?
Probably 40 years.
40 years. And see, there was no such thing as the, what you develop in a forest zone. The only, well,
What about housing?
you guys, how about, is that going to restrict the building of a office or a sawmill or something that's allowed within a, see, that's
But
the problem with
that'd be a
putting
forest
percentage.
development. They're talking non-forest
Oh,
development.
you're right, that is,
Yeah.
right, correct.
So I
See,
think-
and that's why I keep reading it, and I just can't get my head around it,
Yeah.
because it's, the only non-forest activities would be, like you say, would be development of hemp and stuff like that, that wasn't here then, so
Yeah.
maybe you should put a percentage on it.
Or you'd say you had forest land, along a highway, and there was an old restaurant or a bar there, and they wanted to expand it. It was still forest land. Maybe the intent was to restrict it more to the footprint. And there, I believe the zoning has percentage restrictions for non-conforming use expansion.
And then again, is this a ORS that they're mirroring? That's the problem
I
with
don't
all
know,
this
I
stuff.
have that note, look it up.
See, and that's,
Good question, yeah.
that's the problem with all of these, and I bet you'll find most of them are just
Modeled after.
modeled
ORSs,
after
yeah.
forest. Yeah. Okay.
Gail, here's, I don't know if this is a clue or not, but the goal 4 of the LCD out of the OAR, it says zoning applied to forest land shall contain provisions which limit to the extent permitted by ORS 527.722 uses which can have significant adverse effects on forest land operation practices, blah, blah, blah. So there might be something in 527.722 that deals with how and where you limit.
And that's probably
I
what's
I
coming
just don't know
from.
that section. And says the zone shall contain numeric standards for land divisions and siting of land uses which you have, like the 80 acres and so on, and setbacks.
Paul, do you have another comment or question? No.
You ready to move on to 18?
Sure.
Okay. Partitioning of forest lands under the provisions of Clatsop County's forest zones which serve to increase forest management efficiency by allowing one or more forest owners to consolidate their land holdings is encouraged.
And why would you do that?
Yeah. That's a
I'm
warm
gonna
and
take
fuzzy
my
one.
20 acres and you take your 20 acres and let's make it into a 40-acre parcel and fight about it.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
So is this one, if it's not an ORS driven
Yes.
one?
That's
that
a
we really
silly
wanna
one.
remove?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Number 19,
Okay. Clatsop County will rely on the following acreage criteria when reviewing a proposed zone change to a forest zone. AF20 lands in the AF20 zone shall be comprised predominantly of ownership smaller than 40 acres. Ownerships 40 acres and
Well,
larger.
that's irrelevant anymore.
yeah, that one I think
That's-
we should take out, because we have, it's all 80 acre minimum now.
Right. And even the
Yeah.
F38 zones are, we don't have
They're all
those.
gone.
Kind of weird in the F80. Why does it say 76 acres and larger?
It does?
Odd number. Yeah, well, yeah. The
So,
last line, lands in the F80 zone shall be comprised predominantly of ownerships 76 acres and larger.
I guess they were rounding up.
Why 76? I'm curious.
That actually says that, that's an ORS.
No, it's
Policy
a
one had the,
goal 4.
was it policy
goal
two had the
4?
reference
Yeah.
to
Or,
policies 19, 20,
It's goal 19.
Yeah,
So they,
19, 20,
You have a copy of
Is
that?
that policy?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so if we take
yeah,
out
right down
19,
here.
I just want to make a note
Now
to
that's
Okay,
revise
so
it.
move that, revise that.
To the neighbor of the guy who wrote this at 75 acres.
create,
Could be, let's make it 76.
All right.
Policy 20, is that how the
this was revised in
policy numbers get
2012.
out of
Shifted,
sequence?
yeah.
Wow.
Just
I
eliminate
don't think they
one.
revised it.
Yeah,
I think
because
it's
you
all
renumbered.
consolidated, some of them.
So we're looking at 20 we decided was going to leave.
No, we haven't talked about 20 yet.
So I only have to have
Okay, let's go there.
76 acres.
I'm sorry.
If I have 150, if I have 152 acres, I'm trying to add, 152 acres, I can partition it into two F80s. That's very
No,
interesting.
no, it says the zoning shall be comprised of tax lots that are 76 acres or larger.
That's
And
what I
that's
just
only
said.
if you want
You
to,
still need 80 acres to partition.
that's only if you want to change your
That's
designation.
not what that
for it.
says. I just happen to have one of those. That
Make
isn't
an
quite,
exception for
that
you,
isn't
then.
quite two. I think it's just about that.
Okay, so,
Policy 20. I don't
20.
think we hit 20 yet.
no, we didn't. Clatsop County will rely on the following management criteria when reviewing a proposed zone change to a forest zone. So we're back talking about AF20s and F38s.
Right.
Lands in these forest zones are characterized by both agricultural and forest land uses. Management of these lands is often done on a low-intensity, part-time basis.
Another irrelevant.
Yeah.
Say that
So
again.
the
Jim?
whole-
Another irrelevant that's not, doesn't apply anymore.
And the F80 forest land and the F80 zone include areas where timber production is the primary land use. These lands are often intensively managed by full-time professional foresters. So, is that something that you'd want to leave with the other two sections? Or maintain the F80?
F80 forest lands.
Oh, yeah, F80 we have to maintain. Is
Yeah,
it
that's
true,
just-
though, that
That's just a statement. That doesn't have anything to do with,
it's not a policy?
yeah,
And
because
I-
I'm a hillbilly. I ain't no forester and I got plenty of them.
so-
Full-time professional hillbilly.
That's it.
So maybe take out that last sentence that has the asterisk by it?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That kind of makes you sound like if you have over 80 acres, you gotta have a professional
Professional
forester
management.
manage it.
Or you are a professional.
Yeah, right.
He is a professional.
I'm a professional something, I'll give you that.
Okay, policy 21. A zone change from F80 zone to any other zone, including AF20 or F38 zone, shall require a plan amendment. The purpose of such a plan change is to assure that primary forest lands in the F80 zone are not converted to mixed-use forest lands in the F38 or F20
Again,
zones or
irrelevant.
any other plan designation, since part of that can be eliminated, can it not?
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah, I think the whole thing can be taken out.
Okay, policy 22.
Same thing.
Partitioning of land in the AF20 zone and F38 zone shall be approved only upon a finding that such newly created parcels shall be used only for forest uses. This policy does not apply to the small lots resulting from a cluster partition.
Again,
I
irrelevant.
was thinking we could probably remove that one as well.
Those don't exist.
Yeah,
Yeah,
same thing. This whole back part of this is,
but it is not.
What you might want to do is review state law for rezoning standards and criteria. And then if you want to have policies that deal with rezoning, you could take them directly from that to make sure you're consistent with OAR and ORS.
But in a forest zone, unlike a EFU zone, there's no other ways to do anything. EFU, you can do low soil content and everything else. But the only difference in a forest zone is the template test that's, I don't know, isn't that correct? You can't do anything. You can't make smaller lots.
No, you can, but you can apply to rezoning. But I mean, the criteria, it's a really high bar. And
Yeah.
I'm just saying, if you want to have
Yeah,
policies
okay,
for
I see that.
rezoning, they need to reflect that bar that's already in state law.
I
Yeah.
see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Okay, so those were the three policies that number one referred back to.
Yes.
Okay. So policy 23, in land use changes involving a change from conservation forest lands to rural agriculture lands to rural lands or development designations, and exception to the agricultural lands or forest lands goals must be taken.
Yeah, that's state required.
Yeah,
state
that's
law.
right out of state law, so that's a good example of that.
That is the last policy we have listed here.
Thank you.
Put this back in the book for whoever.
So actually, even though we didn't think there were things we could change, we found some changes.
Obsolete.
Obsolete
Yeah.
and clarification, that's what it's all
And some
for.
clarification. So, let's see what time it is here. It's 6:59. So we are at our public comment and input period.
It's you.
I'm all talked out.
Sorry, well,
I'm good.
all right. Okay, so review of meeting dates and times. You have canceled your December meeting. Does anybody feel a pressing need to reschedule it in December? Okay, so then what we're looking to do is January, February, and March, take those months off from our meetings. We have given you goal 5 tonight, just the goal itself and the statewide goal, and the worksheet to start going through and filling out, and a background report. Between now, like the old record clubs, every month we're going to start sending you a packet of information related to goal 5.
Can we
It could be
stop
about-
anytime we want?
Unfortunately
Just
not.
put a penny in an envelope.
So it's going to be, you'll get information about quarries and mining one month, you'll get information about historic resources another month, information about habitat and open spaces and watersheds another month. We're going to pick up our meeting schedule in April. And in the meantime, while we're shipping you materials to read, we're going to be rewriting drafts of goals 1 through 4 based on our meetings today, and then bring those back. So would you like to keep meeting at 5 o'clock on the 3rd, 4th?
Third.
Usually we meet the 4th Thursday of every month at 5.
Yeah, I mean, because when you get older, but it's kind of tough to make it here at 5 sometimes.
So should we, since we're getting dwindling
5:30.
performance on the potluck, do we just want to schedule it for later, or do you
Yeah.
want to keep the potluck and come later?
Well, you can set the potluck and you can eat as you're doing it or whatever.
So start at 5:30?
Yeah.
Is that good?
That'd be
5:30?
better, yes.
5:30. Okay, so then your next meeting, let's see here. Will be April 23rd, 2020.
Is that when spring break? Does that affect anybody's lives? I don't know.
No.
If anyone's a parent.
Unless they
I'm a
give
parent,
county
but I'm a
employees
really
spring break.
old parent.
Okay. Jim, you said you didn't want another goal 5 because you got one already.
I have.
So you've got goal 5, you got goal
Yep.
5. Does anybody want to go completely paperless in their future agenda packages?
No,
Oh,
I get yelled at for reprinting things 4 times already.
okay.
I do exactly the same.
Yeah, I do too. It's-
I
guess
buy
it's-
paper in boxes about this tall.
I read better off paper than I do off
Yeah,
sheet.
I can't read.
I do.
Same, yeah.
All right, so unless anybody has any closing comments,
Well, I would like to hand this to you and see what your input might be regarding those studies. Put your reading glasses away already, didn't you?
Yeah, it doesn't count then.
so can you maybe give us a summary of the article, Jim?
Well, I haven't read it the third time to really get the feeling for what it is. It's basically talking about that the forest industry is the largest producer of greenhouse gas emissions. And it doesn't really, it directs you to the reports. This is more informative, really, than it is really scientific information. Yes.
I think the concern, and I only skimmed the article before the meeting, but I think what they're saying is that because of the wildfire potential, when you do
Right.
have a wildfire, it emits so much carbon that it just
Well, it
detracts
also
from
indicates-
any good
well,
they do.
Doesn't a tree
Yeah, this is
take
more,
carbon and turn it into oxygen?
It says at the bottom, it says
Volcanoes
wood product emissions. This is not forest fire. This is just
No, this is
the
wood product
producing,
emissions.
the equipment and the machinery used to produce lumber. You know, cut the
The whole
trees,
process.
mill them, everything else. Wood product emissions are the result of fuel burned by logging equipment, the hauling of timber, milling, wood burning, burned during forestry activities, and the ongoing decomposition of trees after they are cut. Forest fire emissions were less than a quarter of all forest sector emissions in each of the 5-year increments studied between 2001 and 2015.
And these are studies that are being done by Oregon's and Idaho's land colleges. They're not, it's data collected and compiled.
That says high country, so is that out of Bend?
I'm not sure.
really?
Someone asked that earlier. I wasn't sure that high,
That's where it is.
yeah.
Who-
Yeah,
who
I
is
haven't
doing-
seen this before, but I've heard of this contention, and you know it's all about the science. I mean, if this is real science, then you know, like anything, if they were all electric vehicles, that would be very, very different. Electric chainsaws, and, you know, battery operated equipment, and so that might be the wave of the future. But
Depends upon how you get the electricity.
yeah, I mean, again, there's trade-offs and so on. So
That's one of the newer articles I've read, and it just kind of surprised me today when I just printed it out about 10 minutes before I came.
So when you're done with that, Will, if you want to hand it over, I'll scan it in and email it out to everybody and include it in our minutes. All right, is there any other business for the good of the order? If not, I declare us adjourned and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank